My people, we're ready to mount up like an eagle. Stand and fight against evil. A system rigged and deceitful. King.
What's good, family? Welcome to the King Talks podcast, where we're all about the truth, community, and discussing the things you care about. I am your humble host, Sean Slaughter. And on today's show, we interview my good friend, Lavoisier. Lavoisier is the founder and owner of Grow the Heck Up. Grow the Heck Up is a brand that specializes in Christian info edutainment, race, religion, music, culture, politics, hip-hop, and the Bible, as my dude said. On this show, we're going to talk about various things. We talk about music. We talk about politics, particularly Democrats and Republicans. We talk about the inferiority privilege. We talk about an array of things only as me and my dude can. So, saddle up. Let's do it.
My people, we're ready to mount up like an eagle. Stand and fight against evil. A system rigged and deceitful. King, you can hear it when I rhyme. I'm a king, renewed in my mind. I'm a king, I got a different bloodline. I'm a king, jump, I am a king. I'm a king.
It's funny, I got the Rich Dad collection behind me, and Sean Slaughter was the first person that ever gave me a copy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Word.
And it was the first book I remember reading cover to cover as a Christian.
Come on,
you
man.
read books, you skim them, you put it down, and it totally changed the paradigm of my life. And I'm still living my life in some ways according to the information I learned. And salute to my brother.
Okay.
And he created a monster.
I don't think I knew that. You know, the one memory that I have of you, for everybody that doesn't know Lavoisier, all right? This is the one memory I got of Lavoisier. And it's funny because you've always been, I don't want to say a planner, you've always been a strategist, right? So I don't know if you remember this, but I came to your crib. You know, we lived down the street from one another in Queens. And I came to your crib one time, and this dude pulled out like 2 or 3 binders full of like research, ideas. Do you remember them binders that you had? All right.
Yeah, I do.
This cat had 2 or 3 binders full of like ideas and research and stuff that he typed and stuff that he saved and he opened them up and he was just kind of going through the binders of like, these are some of the ideas, and then this is how it'll build out. These are the next phase. Like you know, people don't realize that before Kanye West came out with his first album, he had it already created. Like he had the idea of Jesus walking everything. That was Lavoisier. Lavoisier had the whole thing mapped out, always strategizing, always planning, and so that's the
corporations, satellite radio, all of that.
I'm telling you, man, that when I think of Lavoisier, that is the vivid memory that I have. And it's funny because now looking forward and looking at Grow the Heck Up and looking at what it's become, it's almost like, duh, it was going to be there anyway. It was going to get to that point anyway.
Wow, praise God. Praise God. We still on our way, good brother. So
no doubt.
Me and Sean have come together to put our heads together to have a discussion about a little bit of everything. We're going to talk hip-hop music. We're going to talk a little bit of politics and anything else that suits our fancy this evening.
It's open season, all right? And I want to throw some questions at you.
Off limits, brother.
You know it. And I love Lavoisier. I love the way that you engage online because you've always been a thinker, and this is the one thing I like. I like the idea how you don't jump into baskets simply because popular culture is all in that basket. You know what I'm saying? And I love that idea. I think it challenges people. I think because of the internet and because of social media, you know how the Bible talks about, our minds can be swayed from to and fro and back and forth because of just people's opinions on our ideas or noise and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I think social media really represents that wave of just the swaying of ideas and people and people just changing their ideas and opinions overnight without facts, without really studying, without having any real moral stances, without really planting their feet into anything, and just kind of, well,
Right.
everybody else is kind of saying
Right.
that. So I appreciate Grow the Heck Up and what you guys do.
Right.
And you could
Praise
definitely
God.
you'll definitely you can definitely check us out on King Talks podcast. Of course, we're all over the different platforms and things like that. The one thing I wanted to talk to you about first off was
Yeah.
this Joyner Lucas joint. All right, now,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. And me, I actually just listened to it today. Like I'm almost like anti-crowd. Whenever the crowd is going towards something, I chill for a second, and then I go take a look at it.
Right.
I don't know, just kind of
Right.
I don't know, it's just the way I do it. So I checked it out, and before I give you my thoughts, and then Bizzle came out with a response to it, and
Right.
But before I give you my thoughts on it, I want to know what was, because I don't think you've posted publicly about it yet. It's pretty fresh. You haven't said anything about the Joyner Lucas.
Yeah. This just happened a day or two ago. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to say anything about it online or anything like that either.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on it? Just on this Joyner Lucas part, what were your thoughts on some of the things he was saying, the song, the overall song, the imagery, all that?
Yeah. Okay. So for those who haven't heard the Joyner Lucas song by now, by the time this comes out, you probably will have. Maybe you haven't. But he's challenging God. He's saying that he's inebriated, and he's saying, "Listen, God, I know you're supposed to be good, but I think you made a couple mistakes." Mm-hmm. And he starts talking about the people that have been taken from him and who he would swap them out with. Mm-hmm. You know, give us back Michael Jackson. Take this one. Take Trump. Take Laura Ingraham. You know, people at Fox News. Take the guy who killed Nipsey Hussle. Give us Tupac back and stuff like that. And you know, I guess I can respect the sentiment, even if I don't feel the attitude. Now, at the end of the song, he cleans it up and says, "It's not you, it's the devil's work."
Yeah,
I really respect that, because I've always been a person who said one line can change the entire doctrine or perspective of a song. Perfect example, Whitney Houston. I believe the children of the future. Nothing wrong with that. Teach them love and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. It's wonderful.
Right.
Last line in the song, she said, "Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all." Bam! Got him. One line in a song can change the entire perspective of what someone is saying. So I respected the cleanup at the end.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where it rubbed me a little bit the wrong way. Because it's a man's standard of righteousness, and it's like, but ultimately I respected it as a sincere artistic expression.
You know, it was the type of song that I had to listen to 3 or 4 times, because I think as a Christian, when you first take the song in, your immediate response is the Christian hairs on your hand and on your arm stand up, right? Like you have this autoimmune response to things that we deem to be sacrilegious, things that we deem to be blasphemous, things that we deem to be, and even the argument that he's making. We've heard this argument millions and millions and millions and millions of times over. God, why do good people, die, and so on and so forth. I think by the 4th listen, the Christian hairs on my arm went down, and I felt like I was hearing Job speak in a sense. I saw some people on social media and other shows talk about bringing, how he was drinking in the church and bought the Hennessy in the church, but then towards the end he leaves it at the altar. The cleanup at the end definitely is what made me be like, wow, he's venting. This is a vent. This is what it sounds like when we vent.
Right. That was a reckoning. I respected that.
Yeah. This is what it sounds like. The questioning, the doubting. So even the whole irrational idea of bring back this person and kill this person. You know what I'm saying? And if you really listen to the song, it's funny because some people are like, yeah, he right, man, I bang with that. And I'm like, but he's advocating murder. You know what I'm saying? Like, so what are we talking about? How righteous is his cause?
No,
you know what I'm saying? But
yeah.
But it's a vent. You know what I'm saying? It just from a human perspective. And I'm gonna tell you what, Lavoisier, I think, I work with kids in an alternative school. And I think the one thing that I'm growing to kind of learn how to do is to kind of say, okay, at first acknowledge humanity. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Christian or non-Christian, we've all had that type of response. And then towards the end, as he cleans it up, and he even says he's venting by saying, God, we know this ain't you. Yeah, God, I know. I know my cousin died and I blame you. I said, why God? But in the end, God, I know you good, man. You know what I'm saying? In his own way, you know what I'm saying? In his own way, he's
respect that, yeah.
He's kind of saying that. And then he of course puts it on the devil and he walks away, leaves the Hennessy there. He takes the Bible with him. Mm-hmm. Do you think that sometimes Christians respond too quickly to things that they deem to be blasphemous or things that deem to be without actually, and I think your network, the Grow the Heck Up network, I think the one thing that you promote consistently is thin slicing. Like, okay, let's not just jump into it. Let's thin slice this thing and see what's really being said. Do you think that sometimes we
for sure
we overreact to those things without thinking? We're more emotional than maybe thoughtful on maybe this particular type song.
Yeah, and I also think there's two sides to it. Like for instance, I think levels of sensitivity. You know what I mean? If a woman has been raped and she hear a rapper make light, Rick Ross said, put Molly all in her champagne. She ain't even know it. I took her home and enjoyed. Like, if a woman has had that experience or is connected to it or happens to have a sensitivity to it, I can't tell her how sensitive she should be to that.
Sure.
So sometimes people's experience cause their sensitivity, and then other times, we're just hypersensitive and we jump the gun sometimes, absolutely, because it's our flesh and we're human too, just like the person who we're making a judgment against, for sure.
No doubt. That's good. And then Bizzle comes back, right? And this cat, man. This dude Bizzle, man. What in the world? And you said you got the track before it dropped?
Yo. He said it to me like the night before.
Okay.
I'm down here in Houston with Biz, man. Okay. That's still don't me 100. And it's interesting that you said the Joyner song was like Job, because Bizzle's response is like God answering in Job.
Absolutely.
I didn't really make that type of connection. Yeah.
When I saw the Bizzle response, when I heard the Joyner thing, I heard the cry, and then I heard really the couple of last chapters of Job is where he says, were you there? Were you there when I so and so forth? Were you there? Who are you? And I tell me what you think about his response. Was it appropriate? I saw some things online where people were saying, did he need to respond? Did you think he needed to respond? Do you think a response was warranted?
Warranted is I don't know, that's an interesting word, because when we're in the marketplace of ideas, everyone's free to respond to anything.
No doubt.
Right? We're all kind of having this open air conversation with one another. Yeah. Rappers address the church all the time. They point out this politician or that church. So I don't know about warranted or needed, but I certainly think that Bizzle being an artist who's counter narrative to the majority of hip hop with the skill level that he has, I think it's definitely a worthwhile conversation, and I'm glad that he put his 2 cents in, even if people disagree, because even the conversations I have, I never front like I don't have a position on something, but I'm genuinely interested in other people's perspective, even when even when it's different from mine.
No doubt.
So at the very least, I think having the 2 sides of the point out there for people to even discuss is healthy, especially in hip hop, where so many of the ideas are so narrow and monolithic sometimes. So I'm grateful for the exchange.
No doubt. Let's talk about that. The ideas that hip hop is kind of bringing to the table, and just hip hop as a culture, as a rap artist. You're a rap artist. I'm a rap artist, and these are things that we've had to kind of struggle with. Where's the line? How much do we allow hip hop to influence us? You know what I'm saying? Where does that line stop? You know, does it stop at the clothes? Does it stop at the language? And so on and so forth. And now hip hop has a huge voice when it comes to political and culture. And of course, I've seen some of your posts. I've seen you post things concerning R. Kelly and his response with Charlemagne, Jussie Smollett, Nipsey Hussle. How do you think what is hip hop's position when it comes to culture as you see it?
Oh boy, this guy's trying to get me in trouble. I think by and large, when I read the ancestry of a lot of people like to go back to Egypt and say we were kings, even though like it's not a bunch of kings just chilling. You got kings and you got peasants and servants, right? But okay.
No doubt.
People like to go all the way back to Egypt when we were kings. I say like we have a rich enough history right here in America for the past 400 years of brilliant people, leaders, thinkers, geniuses, fighters, revolutionaries. And when I read the literature from the ancestors, when I read Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, W.E.B. Du Bois, Carter Woodson, I don't hear any of their narrative in hip hop anywhere, or what's passing for civil rights. So as it stands as a whole, by and large, I don't think hip hop is good for Black people at all in any type of way. And I don't think that it represents the continuing legacy. Some of the people that get sellouts, I hear their ideas. That sounds like Ben Carson.
So what are some of the ideas that hip hop is throwing out there that is kind of the antithesis of, I guess, some of the civil rights activists and leaders that you've mentioned? What are some of the ideas that they've thrown out that you feel is detrimental to Black people?
Well, for one, there's this thing called respectability politics, where people say you shouldn't have to clean up and act with dignity to make white people respect you or anything like that, right? Which I'm in agreement with. But at the same time, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King both dressed well and spoke English well. They had great commands of the English language. They were readers, leaders, thinkers. Malcolm X said my alma mater was books. They championed education and learning and respect for themselves and respect for the Black women. All of these things were just natural to them instinctively. So when I see hip hop take up the mantle of the fight, but not the mantle of the character and the indignity, I'm like, hold on, there's some disconnect here. These people don't mirror what I see in our leaders. So for instance, like, and I, anybody who listens to hip hop can decide what they think hip hop's position is on this. There are 3 things: that there's a left-leaning organization and a right-leaning organization. I forget what the right-leaning organization is, but the left-leaning, the liberal organization is called the Brookings Institute, and they both agree that there are 3 things that people need to do to get out of poverty: finish school, graduate high school, find full-time employment, and don't have a child until you're about 25 or married.
Okay. When
they polled people, only 22% of the people they polled were still in poverty after doing these things. So even I had no way to eat, I had to sell crack. It's like, I know times are hard, fam, but it's like we've embraced the narrative from a time that I don't think we're in anymore. Okay. And it hurts because I believe that it's sending our young people out with this angst towards society before they're crying about a ceiling that they've never hit.
Okay. Okay.
And
So
that's discouraging.
this is interesting, and I have some thoughts on this too. But you mentioned something. They're crying and complaining about a time that you don't believe that we're in. Break that down.
Mm-hmm. Well, ancestors had to go like me chilling in Starbucks, sipping my latte, watching Netflix, listening to Spotify just doesn't look the same.
Uh-huh.
You know, according to Forbes, 69%, according to Forbes and GoBanking.com, 69% of all Americans have less than $1,000 in their bank account.
No doubt.
That includes black, white, rich, and poor of all walks of life. And so I think that I always ask, and I always hear people ask this, do you live better than your grandparent?
Mm-hmm.
When I read what they were fighting for, we have a lot of it.
Yeah.
We still have a ways to go.
Sure.
But I think a lot of the ways in which we have to go are things that are in our own power right now. For instance, starting with the family. There's tremendous power in family. And when you study wealth statistics, married people end up building wealth faster and living longer lives and all this kind of stuff. So there are practices in our culture that I believe that are counter to our productivity as a people group.
And I'm going to respond to some of that because I think people be surprised with some of the things that I agree with. But to play devil's advocate, what if I was to say that?
Talk to me.
Yes, the blacks in the 1700s, blacks in the 1850s had more privileges than blacks in the 1800s. But there still was a level of oppression. Blacks in the 1900s had better than blacks in the 1850s, but there was still level of oppression. And so, to play the devil's advocate, what if I was to say, yes, you are correct. We do have more than blacks had 50, 100, 200 years from now, but it still does not eliminate the idea that there are oppressive elements. Maybe the oppression is not as heavy and as, I guess, society-wide and obvious as it was before. Really, as it was almost 70 years ago. Colored drinking fountains, whites only restrooms. My dad talks about how he, when he was young, he was 12, how he, when they would drive to Virginia, because it's funny, I live in Virginia and my dad's from Brooklyn, but my grandfather's from Dansbury, Virginia, and my grandmother's from Lynchburg, Virginia. So they would drive down to Virginia, and he said there were certain restaurants and rest stops that they had to pass simply because it was a whites-only restaurant.
Wow.
This is 50, 60 years ago. And so, which is really, in the period of history, 50, 60 years is a blink of an eye. And so what would you say to those that
was yesterday.
You know what I'm saying? So what would you say to those that say, yeah, Lavoisier, we are better off. We do have more opportunities. We can now sit in the Starbucks. You are correct. But when I look at Congress and the Senate and the White House, I still don't see representation. When I look at some of the top CEOs in the country, I still don't see and maybe not a level playing field because we're only 13% of this population, but I still don't see a playing field that measures out to the ratio of our population. So what would you say? What would you say to that?
I would say Asians make more money. Poor and rich Asians tend to make more money than whites, and they have less representation than we do. Their household culture is different. So whites are not at the top. That is incorrect. As a matter of fact, by and large, even Nigerians do better than whites. As a matter of fact, Nigerians, I think, are like 2 to 3% of all black people in this country, and yet they represent a quarter of the blacks in Harvard in Harvard Business School. Why? Is society selecting the immigrants that are black, or is there a different household culture that's giving them an edge? Why are Asians outperforming in school? Why? Are they inherently smarter than white people and black people?
Can I give an answer to that? My answer to that,
of course, brother.
My answer to that would be history. All right, I think my answer to that would be history, and I love your statement, and I totally agree with your statement. But I think your statement proves a point. One of the things that you said is just kind of getting, and I want to really focus on this whole idea of we have more than what our grandparents, great grandparents, and so on. So we have more than what they have, and most of the things that we deal with at this point deal with us, right? So I'm gonna give you two examples from my classroom. So I remember I was teaching sixth graders, and I had mostly black kids in my class, and I had this one white kid. He was an Irish kid, and I asked the kids concerning their family, "What are you most proud of?" Some of the black kids said their mama.
Right.
Some of the black kids said Jordans,
Right.
Nike sneakers,
right.
Music. The white Irish kid said my Irish heritage.
Right.
That speaks to history, right? And I agree with your stance on family. You know what I'm saying? We both stand on that same platform. But what I would say is, let me give you another example. And here's a perfect example, all right? I'm not going to say this kid's name, but currently right now in my classroom, I have a African student who was he was an African student that moved to Switzerland. He got in trouble, and now he's at my school, right? And he is an excellent student. All the kids in the classroom be like, yo, you capping. He be like, what is capping? You know what I'm saying? Or all the kids be like, yo, you heard that new Blueface Tatiana? He be like, what is that? I don't know. I don't understand what that is, right?
Right.
Because all black people aren't the same, right?
Right.
But Nigerians,
of course.
And that's to your point. But Nigerians and Asians have not undergone the American slave system. And I think that here's why I'm at on this issue, just so I can be just so I can be clear.
Brother, keep it coming.
I'm right with you in what you're saying as far as I'm not a complainer. I'm not I like the statement that you put on your website, and I agree with it. Don't be a victim. Because I think it's easy to jump into the victim mindset, and anytime something happens, blame it on the white man. Or anytime something bad happens, or you ain't get the raise, or you ain't so on and so forth, or you got passed over, or you literally, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You go into a place, job, so on and so forth, expecting to be victimized, expecting to be shot down, expecting to be chopped down, and it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I'm with you on that. I don't claim victim.
Right.
But I think there is something to be said when my wife's a psychotherapist, and when you understand trauma, when you have a child that is 5 years old that's raped, all right, that trauma will last with that child for a lifetime, and they may get healing. God may restore and fully save that person, fill them with the Holy Spirit. They may get over some of the anxieties or the fears or the panic attacks or the depression or whatever they deal with. But they're scars that follows them throughout life.
For sure.
And just like Paul said, I had this affliction, you know what I'm saying? And I prayed that God would take it away, and he didn't take it away. So, Paul found out that in my weakness, his strength is made perfect. Some people have to, unfortunately for some people, that's their issue, whether it's a mental illness. And so in the same way, if you take that same idea and you apply it culturally, where you have a traumatic couple of 100 years that happened to a culture. Here's another little story. Here's another little story. So
let me interject and say, I'll even do you one better and say that there's social learning theory that it can be passed down for generations, and you never experienced it, and you still reacting like it was you.
Now check it.
Joy DeGroy, one of my favorite speakers, talks about people who experienced 9/11 in New York have no problem getting on planes. Some people watched it on TV in other countries and couldn't get on planes and need to talk to a psychotherapist.
No doubt.
So yeah, trauma affects us differently, and it can be passed on for generations, even if the experience is not continuing.
And you took the words right out of my mouth, and I think that's the point. The grandmother cooks the ham, and she cuts off the butt and the head and throws it in the pot, right? Her daughter sees it, and she grows up, and she cooks the ham, and she cuts off the butt and the head. And her little daughter says, "Mommy, how come you cut off the butt in the head?" And she says, "Well, it just makes it taste better. That's how Grandma did it." But when she goes and asks Grandma, how come you cut off the butt in the head? She says, "Well, because I didn't have big enough pots. So I just cut off the butt in the head so it can fit into the pot." And so I think that's the whole idea. You can have things within your culture that are passed along within your culture. I've always said the reason that we name our kids Shaniqua and Shatanya and, you know what I'm saying, Lashonda, I said because there's rhythm in it. You know what I'm saying? It's something in our African roots. If you actually listen to an African name and the syllables, there's rhythm there. And so a lot of times we're pulling things within us that we may have not experienced, but that has been passed along and part of the culture. And so even though, and here's my question, because I think this is the more difficult question. Even though I may have not experienced, I think I had, in my lifetime, I probably had 2, maybe 3 times a white person call me a nigger in my lifetime. One I remember very clearly.
Okay.
I was actually on the basketball team, and he was another basketball player, and I beat the fire out of him. But that's besides the point. I was taking a foul shot. I was taking a foul shot, and he called me that. I think another time I was in college, and so the point being, to your point, me being called that is way different in the 1950s, where, you know, you were called that like that was your name. You know what I'm saying? So here's my question.
Right.
Here's my question. How do we overcome hundreds of years of traumatic experiences that's been passed along? I think that's number one. And also number two, do you think forgiveness is needed? Or acknowledgement is needed? Sometimes you have that kid in the household, and we've experienced this within our family. Some just issues with my mom and dad, and I'm mad at you because of what you did to me, but you never acknowledged it or said sorry. And then when you acknowledge it,
right,
and you say sorry, then we can have a conversation. So I think there's 2 lanes there. I think there's some kind of acknowledgement that needs to happen. I don't know how that should happen, but I think the more important thing is, how do we overcome the demons, the survival techniques, the survival tactics that our ancestors and that we've had to, you know, that we were forced to use, that now we still have been passed in us, and now we're trying to build families. Now we're trying to build wealth. Now we're trying to get real estate. Now we're trying to do some of these things, and we have to overcome that. How do we do that?
The first thing you asked, the beginning of the conversation was about oppression. And everything you said about trauma, I absolutely agree with you. And I also believe that doesn't mean that that's oppression. If your mom or dad or somebody was molested and they pass on the trauma to you of social learning theory, you have the trauma, but you were not raped. Mm-hmm. So are you now going to find descendants of that person and say, yo, your grandfather raped me? Maybe. Mm-hmm. Highlighted on the trauma is not the same as the firsthand experience. And I'm saying we got to ask ourselves, who's responsible for fixing that?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that's,
as a matter of fact, I even would say, who can fix that is another question as well.
No doubt.
See, Marcus Garvey, he said we're going to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, because while others might free the body, none but ourselves can free the mind. Okay. So even when I talk about the victim narrative, it's not just about being strong. It's about because there's really no other option. Mm-hmm. Really, this is not something somebody could do for you even if they wanted to. Mm. Right. And so the second point, when you ask, well, here we go. That's another thing about trauma. As being a person who I believe I've experienced some trauma can make you hypersensitive as well, to where it's never enough. We've all seen the person who everyone says is good looking, but they don't believe it. Mm-hmm. No matter how many compliments they get, they just still don't believe that they're good looking because of the trauma. Mm-hmm. If Malcolm X or Martin Luther King came back today and they saw how many white people were caping for social justice right now, talking, if they saw white people with fists in the air saying Black Lives Matter to the degree that they saw it today, they wouldn't even know what to do. Mm-hmm. So how much, to what degree are we talking about here? Because there are white people standing up in droves acknowledging this stuff. No doubt. Racists are being called out. You get caught being a rabbi, you can lose your business, you can lose everything. The level of accountability for racism is at an all-time high as well. No doubt. And so when I look at some of those things, I'm not a guy that's trying to put on rose-colored glasses and say that we're all good. But I also know that being a person who was hypersensitive and from the trauma that I experienced, I realized that to some degree it was warranted, but to another degree, I had to find a way to figure out what the solutions were. And here's another thing with the victim narrative. I started meeting plenty white people who are victims to me. Mm-hmm. I meet a bunch of people who are just bound by their past. Mm-hmm. Mama didn't love me. Daddy left. I was poor. I was white, Black, Indian, and Asian, who have the same mentality that I would say is a victim mentality. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that the victim mentality is a Black thing. I think it's a personality thing that can be anywhere.
I think so too. And just to speak to that oppression, trauma comment that you made, I think that was very good. In the way that you stated that. I think what's interesting is if you here's my problem. And trying to address that, because you're a problem solver, I'm a problem solver. So I'm always trying to figure out solutions, right? And so I'm saying to myself, okay, the oppression happened, there's trauma. Now we have trauma, but now we're responsible for now we're responsible for overcoming our trauma. When maybe some of us, a lot of us, have not been given the tools. Right. Let's keep it a buck, man. And this is one thing me and my wife talk about a lot. My wife owns her own business. We both have master degrees. Mm-hmm. I have the feeling.
Okay.
Yeah. My wife got 2 master degrees, so she got 2 on me. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. She got she got 2 up on me. But I feel as a Black person, that's achievable to any Black person. Mm-hmm. I feel it's achievable to any human being, right?
Any Black person.
Anybody, right?
Right. Anybody, right.
But then here's my other struggle.
Talk to me.
You've ministered to inner city youth. I've ministered to inner city youth. We know the majority of African Americans are living in poverty or born without a father in the household. Right? And so I literally have to fight for the mindset to say this is still available to everybody, because it feels like we're fighting against a culture that says, and I hear it every single day, that and I'm gonna give you a little nugget. I'm gonna give you a little nugget before I make this statement. My daughters are 16 and 12.
Right.
I did not allow them to listen to hip hop.
Right.
My daughters don't like, people be probably shocked.
Right.
My daughters don't like hip hop music to this day because they were not allowed to listen to hip hop.
Wow.
So when they hear a Lil Pump, a Lil Skies, they make fun of it because they weren't grown up with it. And they know Christian rap, you know what I'm saying? We took them over to the Lecrae concert, but there were values, all right, just to get back to what you were saying,
right.
There were values that are in hip hop that I could not have them listening to and repeating. Values about values about men, even values about language and demeanor. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so now, but in the landscape of black people in their school, they're the oddballs out.
Right.
And I'm looking for
Right, for sure.
But here's my problem, because I'm looking for the areas in society where they're not the oddballs out, and they're black. You know what I'm saying? Where the idea of and not to paint a broad brush, because I'm really kind of just pulling from my experiences, particularly in the schools, but in the schools that I'm pulling from, the kids that want to achieve and succeed primarily are the white students. Doesn't mean that you don't have black students that don't feel that. Of course, you have black students that are achieving, but not at the rate of white students.
Right. But there's a culture. There's a culture of dismissing academics, right? It's not intellectual capacity.
No doubt.
It's the culture that they bought into.
I have brilliant kids in my class that we have, and it's funny because you'll get this. I have brilliant kids in my class that feel like speaking correctly is acting white, or who feel like education, being smart is acting white. I have tons of kids that don't want to go to college. I have tons of kids that I got kids who are in 8th grade. They're 5'6", 120 pounds, and they tell me they're going to the NFL. You know what I'm saying? And so,
wow.
And so for me, I struggle because I say to myself, how do we turn this tide? And the culture is going, and the culture is almost like a nonstop train going at such a rate. Meaning this. Let's just take one idea out the culture. I'm a bad bee, right? I don't need no man. I could do it on my own, right? I could do it on my own.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's me and my son and my daughter, and we good. You know what I'm saying? I don't need no
right.
Then that idea gets that idea gets commercialized in the Macy's ad, where it had 4 families on there. I think it had like a white family, a gay family.
Bunch of products are like that.
Right.
Bunch of products are like that in advertising. Yep.
And the family all of a sudden now is a mom with her 2 kids. You know what I'm saying? Do I have anything against a mom and 2 kids? No.
Yeah.
I know single mothers who are superwomen. But my whole stance is that
for sure.
My whole stance is that there's an ideal family that I think would be healthier for that child. You know what I'm saying? If that father was there. How do we stop that freight train? Because it's a freight train. Because once it becomes something that is in music, and then it goes from music to commercial to pop culture, and it becomes a thing, like this is the identifiable trait of the culture. That is something that is hard to reverse. You know what I'm saying? To even fight against, to even say, it almost even sounds bad to say dad should be in the home. It's gotten to that point.
It's not even almost among many feminists and people who hold liberal ideas. Unfortunately, that's look at anybody listening to this, go to Black Lives Matter website and look at their 13 guiding principles. I consider that joint to be anti-traditional family and anti-black men. Ironically, whatever you feel like it was started on, look at their website, look at the 13 guiding principles of Black Lives Matter. It's anti-family and anti-black man to me. And so when we talk about turning the tide, right, there's this thing I have called inferiority privilege, bro.
Okay.
It's where you lower the standard for black people because you don't think that they can meet it. And it's almost like, I do have more compassion on us than the people who brought us here. You mad at the white man? You're not mad at your daddy? The white man should know better, but your daddy shouldn't? Why are we giving ourselves that out? No, man. And you see it all the time. You look at the Me Too culture. Society is now holding men accountable for what they say at a rate like never before. It barely touches hip hop, and hip hop says way worse things than the most egregious Me Too offender. Why is the standard different for the black man in hip hop culture? Why can he not be held to the same standard as that senator on Twitter who says something a little bit lewd or crass to a woman? But Future says, I pull out my joint and then I pee on her. Mm-hmm. Right. So he gets to be that in the Me Too era. That's you giving him, that's a privilege to be in fear. Oh, that's just their culture.
And that's dangerous.
Where you would not accept that in anywhere you are.
Yeah.
You would not accept that anywhere else. I'll give you another example. You know the Christmas song, Baby It's Cold Outside?
Yeah, the creepiest song ever.
Right. So they're saying that song is rapey, and they took it off radio stations across the country. Uh-huh. But songs worse than that from black artists are allowed to play every day. Oh, that's for us, not y'all.
So
what's going on, brother? Why is the standard lower for the black man?
But so
George W. Bush, I think it was GWB or his pops. I'm not sure. I think it was George W. Bush because he I think he said it with the No Child Left Behind Act. He said you got to be careful of the soft bigotry of low expectations.
So
to where because I don't think you can meet the standard, I don't hold you to it.
So who is responsible for that? You know, in the early 90s. In the early 90s, and this gets back to my question because I think we hold some responsibility. I think we hold a lot of responsibility for changing ourselves, looking within ourselves. It's almost like the church. You know what I'm saying? Those who are in the church look in the church to fix the issues in the church, right? And we don't look for outsiders to do that, right? Family takes care of family. Right. And I would say the same thing for us, but I think we'll be wrong. I think it would be wrong to be naive to act like there aren't other forces that support this lower inferiority standard. So, for instance, talk about like early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, where you had just this mix of hip hop music. You had your gangster stuff like NWA, but you had your Public Enemy, and you had your Poor Righteous Teacher. It
was diverse.
You had your Grandpa. It was diverse. You had your Positive K, and you were able to hear a spectrum of, let's just say, black ideas in hip hop music, right? But the thing that was the most tantalizing is it's funny as I look at Old Town Road, or you posted a video,
right?
You posted a video of this white girl, and she was doing the whole gang signs.
Oh,
and she was rapping a joint,
throwing up the set and all of that.
All that, right? And I said to myself, I think it was Jimmy Iovine in Interscope Records, and what's their manager's name? NWA. But the whole idea was to sell this image, right? This gangster, Jerry Keller, and the whole idea was to sell this gangster image that really was more like a fantasy, and that fantasy couldn't be touched by the white consumer. That's why it was so intriguing. You know, it was almost like back in the day in the Cotton Club, where blacks can sing on stage, but whites were allowed, and the Cotton Club sat in the middle of Harlem, and so to go to the Cotton Club for a white patron was an experience. It was like what they quote them. It was like going into the jungle. It was like dangerous, and it was scary. And we were going into this neighborhood, and we were walking to the Cotton Club, and it was this whole idea of getting a taste of the culture and the aspects of the culture without being in the culture. And I think that's what a lot of times the music does today, because if you look at the majority of the consumers, just go pull up YouTube and look at some of the people who are attending the concert. But my original question is this: who's the fault for that? I mean, of course we take some of the blame, but don't we? Aren't there those that own record labels? Aren't there those that own manufacturing companies? I mean, how many media companies are there? Really? 2?
Yes, sir.
Maybe 3, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And so. Not only have we, because there's a let me see if I can find the quote. Freedom is never. Martin Luther King Jr. said this: freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded. It must be demanded by the oppressed, right? But when you accept the low inferiority standards, when you accept that the aspects of how you deal with women, money, and culture is kind of the bottom of the barrel, and then you have those that say, what I feel, you have those that say, yeah, that's what they talking about. That's what they doing. Their culture will never rise with that. Let's continue to perpetuate that. Let's continue to fund that. Let's continue to produce that. Those are the songs that we want.
Right.
Those are the songs that we want.
Let me speak to that. And I think, and brother, just for those of you people who don't know our relationship, I really believe you're one of the smartest people I ever met in my travels, brother.
Come on, man.
And but I want to preface that by saying, even that right there is a little bit of inferiority privilege. Okay. Diddy owns a TV station, billionaire. Jay-Z owns a Spotify, it's called Tidal. Dr. Dre proverbially owns our ears with beats. You understand? Like, this is not little guys on the corner with no power anymore. 50 Cent got empire power movies. Media Takeout started by a black lawyer. World Star Hip Hop started by a black guy from Queens. Love and Hip Hop created by a black woman, Mona Scott. We are in control of more media than we ever have been in the course of human history.
No doubt.
And why is it that we're acting like these billionaires should not know better, but me, little Voss, working, trying to eke out a living, don't judge them poor billionaires.
Yeah.
No, these guys got the power to put out whatever they want to put out. Jay-Z is doing some of the most positive, having some of the most positive messages that he has in his whole career right now. Casanova 2 times is still on his label, though.
No doubt.
Hey, like Pac said, that's the way it is.
But isn't that, to me...
That's the way it is. And here... Go on.
No, and I was going to say, I'm not denying that, but to me, that's the cycle. And the statement that we have more than we ever had still doesn't speak to the fact that there's still an over... still doesn't... If you think about revolt, right? You think about some of the things that Jay-Z's doing. Yeah. These dudes are literally, even though Diddy's had money for a while, we're talking about Ted Turner moves that he's trying to make, right? Guys, forget the whole starting a record label, right? We're not talking about that.
Right.
These guys are really just coming into their own when it comes to that type of real estate. When it comes to owning a TV channel and so on and so forth. But
for sure.
But right, they're just coming into their own. So we can't act like, oh, they now got the power, you know what I'm saying, to do whatever they want to do. But what I will say, though, is I think it's that cycle. I think it's the cycle of this is the stuff that got us here. This is the stuff that made us money, right? This is the stuff that we were allowed to do to get into the door. Now that we're here, we got to keep this. We got to keep the cycle going. You know what I'm saying? Because really.
Hey, listen. That's what the slave owners said.
Because really, this conversation that we're having is a money conversation.
Right, and see, but even with that, Sean, that's where I have to step back and say, I'm an individual because what you want not you, but what you want my daughter to listen to that? You want my daughter to be like Cardi B? And when I say, hey, I'm one black man trying to raise children in a blended family, it's almost like people put more expectation on me not to judge them than they do with them with all that power.
Right.
It's like, you know what I'm saying? So they riding around. And listen, I'm not hating on success. We post things from Jay-Z. I got books from Jay-Z here. I got Decoded. I got Empire State of Mind right here. Look, man, like I'm with it. Like, right? So, but again, there's the idea where, hey, that's why I just got to be an individual. These are my values.
Sure.
And you choose your values. I don't think you're inferior to me. And here's the thing, brother. When I have this conversation with people, I'm talking about the hoodest dude will tell you about COINTELPRO.
No doubt.
The hoodest dude with no education will tell you how they changed the rap music and all that. If you're intelligent enough to understand that and choose to still listen to it, that's you.
Right.
Because I have these conversations and brothers be like, yeah, but you don't know they did this in 1979 and in 86. I'd be like, oh, what? and you still with it, okay. You're choosing an inferior ideology.
No doubt. No doubt.
So Martin didn't talk like that. Marcus didn't talk. Martin, Malcolm, and Marcus did not talk like that. And so if you're smart enough to know, if you know enough to know that this is propaganda and all this, that, and the third, only to use it as an excuse to give into it, I'm going to treat you as my equal and say, you're making a choice and so am I. I'm not going to treat you like you're a child that just don't know any better. You're not as smart as me. No, you have the equal capacity I have to choose morally. You have the same moral intelligence I have to experience life, to realize that wasn't the way. And here's the real deal. Any given day, you can find some real hood gangster dude on Instagram or social media calling out the community for the things that they know are wrong.
No doubt.
It's not like it's a secret.
No doubt.
It's dudes out here cussing like, yo, man, take care of your MFing kids and stop playing.
No doubt.
Already privileged. I'm not better than you. I believe me and you are looking at the world. I'm making choices. You're making choices.
Thanks for listening to the King Talks podcast. You can find out more about King at kingmovement.com. Also, you can subscribe to the podcast on any of your favorite podcast apps or websites. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Peace. We out.
Yeah. I had a dream. I saw black slaves in 2018 pulling them big king with a crown in the middle, looking like tug of war. I guess they forgot the inheritance of the Lord, dying over streets when God gave him the earth. It's all in the Bible, just do your research. White man's religion, that's just fake news. The cross hit Africa for Europe even knew. This ain't black versus white, this is dark versus light. But racism might distract you from the Christ on sight. So here's the Visine, me and my team. Dark world, but we flipping on a high beam. King, K is for the knowledge, I is to inspire. N for the nurture, the G is to grow higher. Jesus lit the match, so we all on fire. You see